What comes to mind when you think about your app, your product or service? Maybe you think about the code, the infrastructure, the hardware, or maybe you think about the finished product itself. The tech industry as a whole is really focused on these parts. We get really excited about new products and new releases, and these things should definitely be celebrated.
But really, what we want to focus on today is designing for humans and solving problems for humans at a really base level. I'm Earl Carlson. I'm a design manager here at DigitalOcean.
And I'm Celia McQueen. I'm a senior product designer on the UX team.
And this is the team that we work on. It's full of kind of really wonderful and amazing humans. We have some researchers, some designers, some managers, and we're building tools for developers and really focusing on solving problems for humans. We're a hybrid team that works in New York. We're all working from home right now because of the pandemic, and then also we work around the world. And it's been a really cool challenge to get a chance to work with these people to figure out how we shift our processes to continue designing for humans and figure out what humans really need. When we take a step back, we start to look at these problems and these challenges that people are facing, and we realize that they're really different from one another a lot of times. And as we continue to zoom out, we realize that humans each have their own goals, their own obstacles, ambitions, environments that they're working in, levels of comfort, levels of skill. And before you can build something that's truly impactful and meaningful, you have to take a step back and really understand your customer base. You need to spend some time with them. And this is where design comes in.
Yeah, design is a lot more than pixel pushing and making things pop. And don't get me wrong, we can totally do those things too. But it's not the only part of the design process. You might have heard of the term design thinking. That's a problem solving process that enables you to create a really innovative solution to your customers' needs. And don't let the name throw you. Just because design's in the title doesn't mean it's exclusive to designers. Anybody can apply design thinking. And we're going to show you a few basic practices that you can start doing right away that'll help you deliver a better product experience for the humans you're building for. If we look at the full product design process, that make it pop moment typically happens around the time we were designing the UI. And maybe this is when you usually think to bring a designer into the conversation even. But as you can see, there's a few more steps involved here. And design thinking happens all throughout this process, but it's really critical in the early stages. That's when we're working to understand who we're actually designing for and getting clear on the problem that we're solving for them. So developing empathy for your customer is really important. There's a couple of ways that we like to do this at DO within our design team and like the broader org as well. We love to share stories after we've been speaking to customers about the ways that our product or our service has impacted their life, whether it's positive or negative. Because these are the things that really bring us together and help us understand that hey, at the end of the day, it's somebody having a real experience. One story that comes to mind was a customer who was solely responsible for the infrastructure for the company that he worked for, and it was all privately hosted at this point, but something went wrong in the middle of the night. He got a call from his boss. He had to jump on his bike and ride from Manhattan over to Manhattan over to New Jersey in the pouring rain. This is in winter. And that's just a horrible experience for anybody to have. And it's not one you usually associate with cloud infrastructure, right? But we share these stories so that we remember that there's always somebody on the other side that we're really there to take care of and help make their lives easier.
Yeah, and hearing those stories really helps us as we move through the rest of the process. When we get into the ideation stage, for example, what we're trying to do is really just brainstorm and come up with a bunch of different ideas to help solve the problems that we hear from our customers. So this is the stage where collaboration is really important and you bring in a diversity of perspectives. You hear these stories coming from our users. And what we want to do at that point is we really want to come up with a broad range of different ideas, and we want to avoid getting stuck in one idea and just assuming that that's the right thing because it feels good in the moment. Because a lot of the best ideas that I've seen in these sessions and in this stage are things that come out of left field. tool that you can use is coming up with the worst ideas, and part of this tool is coming up with a really fun way to really broaden the net, and also to lower the like kind of barrier for shouting out ideas and coming up with things. So this tool, basically, all you do is you take a bunch of post-it notes, get everybody in the room together, and you come up with your worst idea for the solution. Just the absolute most terrible thing that will make your user just feel bad inside. And then what you do after that is you take all of those post-it notes and you make them even worse. You take them and like take it like 2 steps further. So it's just like the worst possible experience that your customer could have with your product or outside of your product. And you put those up on a wall, and what it does is it does something really magical in that now no one's afraid to fail with their ideas, and people are really open and allow themselves to just think outside of the box. And it sounds really cliche, but it's really, really important here, because you're going to be testing and building and analyzing whatever comes out of this ideation session.
I'm always surprised, even with like the bad ideas. There's always one that you're like, that's actually not too terrible. We should look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me. One of the people on our team recently came up with a really bad idea that like might actually be shipping sometime in the next couple of months, like, which would be really ridiculous. And the next stage that we get into is prototyping, validating, and testing, because really what you want to do here is you want to optimize for super quick learning. You want to get out there and prototype with the like lowest fidelity thing that you can prototype with to get information back from your customers. And honestly, a lot of times what this looks like is just really bad sketches on paper, where you're just drawing boxes and then showing your users just like, hey, what do you think of this idea? Maybe sometimes you might jump into wireframes and a tool like Balsamiq or Keynote or Google Slides. You can jump into actual design tools like Figma or Sketch, and you can even get like really high fidelity in a tool like InVision, where you're like actually creating an entire flow that feels very real to the user. But the biggest thing here again is like figure out the lowest fidelity thing, the scrappiest thing that you can do to get information before you actually have to build it with your engineering team. You can have one person going through doing a bunch of sketches in a day, and then like coming back to their users, like finding out a bunch of information, and then you're like skipping 2-3 sprints worth of work just to get something out the door to find out if it's the right thing.
Oh, I thought you were going to do the Dropbox example.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. Yeah, there's actually like a really good example of this with Dropbox. So if you look at Dropbox's pitch video, it shows Dropbox working perfectly, where they drag some files, they upload up to a cloud server, and then they can like download them from another computer somewhere else. They had built none of this, and they made a video in After Effects, and then through that video they were able to both validate that this was something that people wanted, and then they were also able to raise a bunch of angel investing. So this is like a perfect example of like, you don't need to engineer the thing, because it probably would have taken them 2 years to like actually build this thing out. And instead they went through and they figured out what's the lowest fidelity thing that we can do to get people understanding what we want to try to build in the future. And now we look at Dropbox, and it's one of the world's largest file sharing platforms.
I guess it's a kind of similar mentality to, developing an MVP, but it's like even earlier on than that. It's like, what is like the bare minimum you could get in front of somebody just to get a reaction from them? Hey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's just, it's like a pre-MVP in some ways.
Yeah. But if you don't have a designer on your team yet thinking about these things, we've come up with 5 questions that you and your team can ask yourselves that will really help you to make sure your experience is a human-centered as well. And these will work if you're still figuring out the bigger picture stuff, like maybe you haven't quite figured out your product market fit and you're just exploring an opportunity, or if you already have an existing product and you're introducing a new feature, it'll work in that case as well. So the first question, what problem are you solving? There's a famous quote from a Harvard business professor, Theodore Levitt. He says, people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill. They want to buy a 1/4-inch hole. And if we push that even a little bit further, what's that 1/4 inch hole for? Maybe they want to hang a picture of their family in their living room. The more that we step away from the focus on being on the product that's actually being sold, we start to get this broader perspective of the person that is actually buying it and what they're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, and to that point, the second question is who's this for? You want to get more than a general understanding of your users. You really want to get to know them and ask them things about their day-to-day experience, not just with your product, but across the board. You want to know about their goals, not just their goals again for whatever your product's offering, but their goals for, how are they setting up their business, or how are they getting through their day, or what do they want to do in 2020? You want to know their pain points, the things that kind of keep them up at night, because your product might be able to solve something that they didn't even think about if you understand these things a bit more. And you want to look for consistent themes and start to pick apart, are there distinct groups? For example, at DigitalOcean, we have a group of learners, people that are new to cloud infrastructure and are just sort of getting their feet wet. And we also have the group that's like been doing this for 10, 15 years. They're just like pros across the board. They just want to dive into all the details. And those two distinct groups have very different needs and very different pain points. It can be a little bit overwhelming when you're starting to try to take a step into this for the first time. And you really want to start with a way that's manageable. Just like the MVP stuff that we were talking about earlier, just find the thing that is the easiest for you to do. And as an example, this t-shirt that I'm wearing right now, actually, it's made by this company, Diop. And after I bought it, they sent me an email after a couple of weeks, and they're just like, hey, do you mind hopping on the phone for 15, 20 minutes? And of course I said yes. I was like super excited to hear about what was going on with them. And we started talking, and the co-founder started asking me a lot of questions. He was just like, how do you like the fit of the shirt? How do you like the pattern? Because it's like super bright and bold. He asked me questions about like where I was wearing it, what I was wearing it with. And then he's asking me some more personal questions and trying to get to know me a little bit. Just being like, how do you like living in Brooklyn? Are you a spring and summer guy? Are you more of a fall, winter guy? Things like that. I'm just really trying to take a step into my life. He even asked about my cats and asked questions about like how old they are. And I told him about how one of our cats is like really fat and overweight. And it's just like the silly. And yeah, just like my cat's name is Eggs as well. So it was like kind of like fitting that he's a fat cat. But those things like really for him started to help him form an understanding of who's buying the product. And he does these interviews with almost every customer that walks through, because they are a small, scrappy startup trying to figure out their product market fit and make sure that they're delivering value to their users. And he told me that he'd be using a lot of this information to help inform what they're going to build or what they're going to make for next season and the following seasons. And the big thing is you want to make sure that you're capturing all this information, because once you do, you're able to really get away from these arguments that can happen where you have 4 people in a room just bantering back and forth, and really start to focus on the humans. One tool that we like to use is called Jobs to be Done, and it just helps kind of formulate those things a little bit more, and we'll get into that in a second. But the biggest thing here is always come back to the human. If you find yourself getting into an argument and you don't have enough data, take the step back to go interview some more users and go talk to them. And it can be really scary the first few times. Trust us, it's scary for us almost every time, but you get used to it and you kind of get into the habit of it.
Yeah. It's a great shirt, by the way.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
So as Earl mentioned, at DigitalOcean, we use a framework called Jobs to be Done. And this helps us keep the focus on the customer's perspective as we're designing and building. If you're looking at this and thinking, it's a little similar to a user story, they are kind of similar, but there's an important difference with Jobs to be Done. User stories can be kind of limiting because they often describe the design of the solution in them. And when you read a Job to be Done, you shouldn't be able to visualize a UI or like what the product is. The idea is that the framework helps you get to the heart of what job your product or feature is being hired to do. And you do that by identifying 3 core elements. There's the customer situation, their motivation, and what their desired outcome is. And there's a lot of talks that go into great depth on jobs to be done, and we're going to link to a few of those in a document we'll share after this. But we'll take a quick look at one example. So I work on the Teams feature at DigitalOcean. So this is one that I used for a recent feature that we were working on. I won't mention what it is because that'll give it away. So when other people have access to infrastructure that I'm responsible for, I want to minimize security risks as much as possible so that I can protect the business and maintain peace of mind. Notice there's no mention of DigitalOcean in here, and there's no reference to any particular feature or UI element either. And even reading that, like, you may think of a few solutions that exist out there that could maybe answer to this, but those also weren't included or referenced. If we use this as our starting point, it really allows for a much broader discussion around how we can solve it. And that's how you get to more innovative ideas for your customers. Jobs to be done can be both functional or emotional. And in this case, it is both. So there's some functional elements to this. You know, the person wants to minimize their security risks and protect the business. But it's also emotional because you can see that they're responsible for the infrastructure, and they also want to maintain their peace of mind. So it's interesting when you think about DigitalOcean, you know, we sell droplets, we sell cloud infrastructure. But it turns out we're also in the business of stress reduction as well. So this can create a really big mindset shift for your team as you're working through different problems for your customers, and really helps you to keep them as the central focus and not yourselves, and not like your current like technology or anything like that. It really comes back to the human need. The nice thing about it too is that all disciplines can use it. You know, it's not just for, you know, the product side of the organization. This can be really helpful in figuring out how to market your product as well. So try writing one. They are a little tricky to write. It might take a couple of goes, but it's okay to be bad. Just keep working through it. You know, with anything, like when you're trying any of these things that we're suggesting, go easy on yourself. Like if it's your first time. This is mine and Elle's first time recording a remote video talk, and you know, we actually did it once yesterday and I managed to not be recording the entire time, so this is actually take 2. So go easy. To be fair,
I also messed up one time as well, so yeah. We're figuring it out.
Yeah, exactly. We've had a few cameos of pets coming in that will probably be edited out as well. So question number 3, what is the bigger journey here? Now that you have an understanding of the problem that you're solving and who you're solving it for, it's time to zoom out a bit and understand what the bigger context is that this is all a part of. A method that we use to do this is customer journey mapping. And the nice thing about customer journey mapping is you can do it whether you have an existing product that solves a problem or not. So you can see how your product fits into this customer journey, or you can use it to just explore a potential opportunity as well. It's a bit more involved, this one. So we're going to link to a few guides to help you how to do this. But at a high level, you really want to understand like what the before, during, and after is where with interacting with your product or the problem that you're solving if you don't have a product. And once you have a look at that, like a broader view of that, you can start to see, well, where are the touch points or the potential touch points with our business? And even more importantly, you can start to see by talking to your users and understanding like what are the highs and lows of this journey? Where do people feel really excited and really, really positive about what's happening? Where do they feel really down and really low? Where's their tension? And that emotional aspect will help you design better solutions for those moments.
As an example of this, you can imagine if we're starting a new coffee shop, we might get really focused on finding the best quality coffee beans. We might want to make sure that we get the best quality espresso machine and like really like dial in the water to bean ratio and just get it like perfect, make the perfect cup of coffee. But if we don't zoom out, we might miss a lot of opportunities to bring in more of that understanding of our user's journey. When we take a step back, we might think about it and be like, okay, somebody's coming here. They've woke up really early for a presentation in the morning, and they have to drive to work. And as they're driving to work, they see that there's a new coffee shop, and they decide to try it out. And as we're sitting there as the clerks, we see this person walk in, and we tell them like, hey, how's it going? Like, how's your day going? And they're like kind of stressed out. You can see that. And through a little bit of conversation back and forth, they like start to relax a little bit. And you take their order. They just want like a large black coffee. You pull it up for them really quickly. And then they walk over, they grab their coffee, put some cream and sugar in it, put a top on it, and you tell them like, good luck with your presentation. I hope you knock it out of the park. And you can just see them like visibly like lighten a little bit. And that person gets into their car and they take their coffee, put it into the cup holder, and as they're driving to work, their presentation isn't even on their mind really. They've actually like calmed down a lot, and they get to work, they like crush their presentation. And like your coffee situation, your coffee shop, it had the opportunity to just be a cup of coffee, but then what ended up happening is you made it into something larger. You made it into a larger journey, and you're focused on their experience through and through. And you provided them with not just like some ways to like calm some stress, but hopefully some moments of delight as well. And to that point, if you like understand that journey, you can start to think about where you can add delight. Delight can really help bring your brand like from kind of base level, I'm building a tool or I'm using a tool if I'm a user, to just like, this is something that's really memorable and kind of something that's important in a really weird way. I say weird because looking at this animation on the slide, we have a monkey that's sweating as he's about to push a red button. And this is how you send an email campaign out in MailChimp. I remember the very first time that I sent an email campaign out in MailChimp, and like frankly, there's no reason for me to ever remember sending out an email campaign via an email marketing tool. Like, it's just like the most boring like thing that I can imagine doing, and somehow MailChimp made this moment like not only really delightful, but they actually removed a lot of the stress that comes from doing that when you're like sitting there second guessing yourself. You're like, did I actually like spell check everything in this email? And kind of understanding that MailChimp really has pushed into this and leaned into it, and they've developed something that's not only reliable, but also really delightful as you're using the product. Some tips here are, you want to make sure that you don't just get bogged down in being a serious business. Frankly, that's a pretty old world view of things. And we have to remember, again, that we're building tools for humans. Humans like things that are reliable, but also humans tend to like things that are a little bit of fun and sometimes a little bit cheeky. You can get a little bit, or this can be a little bit difficult if you don't take a step back to really understand your brand a bit more. You can ask really simple questions, things like, how would you describe your brand to a friend? If your brand was going out to a dinner party, like what would they wear? If they were going out to the club or some other fun party, like what would they wear? Or like what would their Halloween costume be? Just have a little bit of fun with it and lead with curiosity. And the big thing here too is like jumping back to the user journey part of it. You can really pick apart where it's important to add those moments of delight. So when we think of the coffee shop example, it's like right as somebody walks in the door, perfect moment for delight. And right as they're leaving, also a perfect moment for delight. You don't want to do it in inopportune times or times where things can be like really high stress or anything like that. Like, don't be like overly delightful and cheerful. Just find those right moments.
So that brings us to the final question. Is it time to hire a designer yet? If you're thinking like, all these things sound great, but if you really don't have the time to dedicate to it, it might make sense to hire a designer. And the earlier that you hire a designer, the more in touch you're going to be with your users' needs along the way. In most cases, it makes sense to hire a generalist as your first designer hire. That means a person that has experience doing some user research, some UX design, some UI design. And if you hit the jackpot, you might find somebody who has some front-end chops as well. But you want somebody that's comfortable wearing a lot of different hats and is flexible and likes to work in a bit of scrappier fashion. All I'd say is make sure that your first designer has a few years under their belt and has had experience with products where they've shipped things that have gone live, and if they can show you that in their portfolio. We'll include some links to hiring resources in the document we'll send out to, places that we recommend advertising, and any other tips that we can find to help you out. So just to recap, the 5 questions are: what problem are you solving? Who's it for? What's the bigger journey here? Where can you add delight? And is it time to hire a designer? And we just want to reiterate, like, it's okay to not have it perfect the first go. The important thing is that you're trying, and your users will sense that if they can see that you're making an effort to really understand them. And, you know, to Earl's t-shirt example, like, that sounded like it was actually a really meaningful call that you had with the guy, and I probably, like, reflects really well on the company for you now too. So remember, it's okay to be bad at this. All these things come, it comes with practice over time.
Yeah, and you might have heard of the analogy of a three-legged stool. We have the business side of the product, we have the technical needs, and we have the user needs. And these are the 3 legs that really form the perfect app in a bunch of ways. You have just a really deep understanding across the board. And design can help you with that 3rd leg. And like Celia was saying, it doesn't have to be like hiring a massive team of designers. You can still be really scrappy with this. The thing that's really important to remember here is that your users don't need a 3-legged stool. A 3-legged stool is really just a tool so that they can make beautiful music.
Aw, cute.
Thanks, y'all, for joining.
Yeah, thanks.